Hey folks, I am Rebecca of Blonde in the Belly of the Beast. This is Robyn Riley of Critical Condition. This is our channel, Motherland, that we have appropriately named, we feel like, after two naming snafus, Critical Condition and Blonde in the Belly of the Beast. We're like, we're not going to mess this up. We're going to name our channel something appropriate. So today we're going to be talking about some of our birth preparations, how we're taking care of our bodies, things like that, what kind of birth support we're choosing, the professionals, making a birth plan. Robyn's ahead of me in the pregnancy, so she's going to have a lot more valuable advice than I will on this. I'm 19 weeks, so I'm still in this phase of my pregnancy where I'm like trying to get by, you know. I'm still in survival mode, so I haven't done a whole lot of planning. I have my 20-week scan next week, and so I'm kind of waiting. I don't know. I'm just procrastinating about everything until that scan. I'm like, once the 20-week scan happens, I'm going to get ready. It's going to be real to me. I mean, but my bump is so big at this point that like, it's hard for me to be in denial. But
the 20-week scan makes it so real, I feel like. And you're starting to feel movement now and stuff as well, aren't you?
I am, but I started to feel movement around 18 and a half weeks. And then like, it's really weird. I've heard that you can't really feel what it's like. And so I heard that it's like popping bubbles. And so that's kind of what I was expecting. But then I kind of felt this like kneading, you know, in my lower abdomen. And it was like lower than I thought the baby was positioned, like sometimes even near my pelvis, and then sometimes a little bit above. And so I'm like, is she just moving around in there? Or are these farts? Like I did not know. And so now I'm like, I've had about 2 days of her where she hasn't had very much activity. And so I'm a little worried. So I'm constantly like drinking cold drinks. I'm like, wake up. She's probably like, bitch, stop it. Like I'm sleeping in here. I'm floating in this placenta waterbed. Leave me alone.
Because they're so small still at that stage. But I would say that the feeling of like pressure or movement in your lower pelvis is actually a good thing, because that's what I started to feel in the beginning too. And my midwife told me that was a good sign that the baby's head down. And it's actually the baby's head, which is the heaviest part of the baby at this stage, right? Kind of hitting up against the bottom of your uterus, which is what you want, right? You want the baby to be head down. Even at this early stage, it's great if they're already in a head down position, because they're likely to stay that way. Yeah.
And then I'm still getting some cramps that are like menstrual cramps every once in a while. And that always freaks me out, because I know it's not round ligament pain. And it just makes me feel like I'm about to start my period. So I'm always like, what's going on? And like, for the moms out there or people that are pregnant, just don't learn from my mistakes and don't Google anything ever. It's like, oh, are you feeling menstrual cramps? Like check for bleeding every 5 minutes. And if you're bleeding, like immediately go to the hospital. I'm like, I can't do it. I can't do any of this. I'm just gonna chill out. I'm not.
Ignore Dr. Google. There's no peace of mind to be gained by looking into Dr. Google.
No, indeed.
So we're going to be talking about, I guess, because myself and Rebecca will have slightly different expectations and preferences for how we want our births to go. And there will obviously also be some similarities. So we're going to talk about that from the second trimester perspective and my perspective, which is closer to the end, the middle of the third trimester. Also, I can see there are some people that are popping into the chat. Thanks for joining us, guys. We don't have super chats yet, but if you kind of like tag myself or tag Motherland, the channel, we'll be able to see your questions more easily. And we'll do our best to address any of the reasonable questions, the non-breaking of TOS type questions that appear in the live chat as we do our little chat today. So for me, like I guess, I mean, I am a little neurotic. And when I tell my mom about all the birth preparations that I'm doing, she's just like, you millennials, like you're crazy. You have way too much time on your hands. I have no idea like how you're not driving yourself crazy, because when I was pregnant, I basically forgot for 2 months and then realized that I was pregnant again, like halfway through my pregnancy, because I was so busy, you know, working a full-time job and stuff. But for me, I've been preparing, I feel like even before I got pregnant, I've been preparing, you know, and like nutrition and exercise has been one of the biggest things for me that has given me like peace of mind. But in that first trimester, as I'm sure you know, Rebecca, the nutrition part is somewhat impossible because you feel like crap and you want to puke all the time and you have serious aversions. And I know that a lot of women out there have anxiety about not getting their proper nutrition in trimester 1. We spoke about this a little bit before, I think in one of our previous episodes, about how we were both kind of struggling in the beginning with some aversions.
I still am.
Yeah. And low energy too. Like it's not easy to get out and exercise when you feel like, you know, you haven't slept in days, even though you're constantly tired. So I mean, I don't want to like wag my finger at anyone or tell anyone that you have to do this or you have to do that. But I think you should listen to your body. If your body is telling you to avoid eggs and to avoid salmon, just go with it and try to supplement your protein and your omega-3s in other ways. There are lots of different ways that you can supplement those things, even with like a chocolate protein smoothie. I mean, you're going to tell me you can't get down a chocolate protein smoothie?
Yeah.
We can all do that, you know?
And then
try
I think
not to
cravings.
stress.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No,
I think
okay.
cravings have some legitimacy sometimes too.
Totally. I'm a big believer in intuitive eating. Like, I don't think that it makes sense to be sitting down every day weighing my carbs, weighing my fats, weighing my protein so that I'm getting like a specific number or like charting macros like obsessively. If there are some days where I'm craving more protein, that's what I eat. If I'm craving more fruit another day, that's what I eat. And I really try and listen to my body and get in touch with that. And of course, you know, if you're taking your prenatals, that kind of does cover the basics and it covers your basis so that I think it gives you a little bit more freedom to just follow your body's lead and go with what it is that you actually want to eat, because chances are that's what you need.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the food recommendations are dangerous, like the mercury thing. I think that there are a lot of did we talk about this last time? The study they based the mercury.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so if you look at the FDA mercury standards, they tell you don't eat more than 8 to 12 ounces of any kind of seafood a week. But the study they based the mercury findings on was from Islander women that were eating like swordfish 5 times a week. I mean, so I keep it under 12 ounces, but like I have been strongly craving canned tuna recently. So like once a week, I'm making canned tuna and eating it with like chips or like I have to have it. I have to have it. I just did that. And I think that that's my body being like, you need more omega-3s.
Totally.
Yeah. But I kind of think the mercury thing's bullshit. I don't know.
I think so too, especially if you have access to like wild fish. Like I've been eating mostly salmon. I've had tuna once, I think. But that's not because I don't like tuna. I just have a bit of an aversion to it most recently. But salmon I've gotten back into. And throughout my entire 3rd trimester, I've been eating raw wild salmon roe. I know it's rotten. Like at first I was loving it and I was really enjoy it. But like if you eat 30 to 40 grams of fish eggs every single day for like weeks and weeks on end, you're going to start to get disgusted. So I tried all these different recipes to get them down because they're one of the best options for bioavailability of omega-3s and stuff. But at this point, I'm literally just like sort of putting them on a spoon and knocking them back as if they're like pills. Because if I chew them up, I start to retch. It's horrible. My husband gets it. He gets a huge kick out of it, but it's like, I have to do it because it's just the easiest way to get them down. And I'm way less concerned about things about like mercury levels when we're talking about roe, right? It's the big fish that are supposed to be the most concern, right?
Because mercury accumulates in your body, and so or the body of the fish, and so they're mostly worried about large fish like big-eyed tuna. I think albacore are bigger fish, which is why they say that albacore has more mercury. I barely speak. Oh my god, my brain. So if you stay away from big fish generally, I don't know why that would be a problem. Like smaller salmon, I can't imagine that has very much mercury at all. Shrimp, things like that. I think it's fine. I don't know. And then there's a lot of fear mongering around some different fruits. Like I've been told not to eat grapes or pineapple.
What?
Which I think is just crazy town. The grapes, it's from the resveratrol.
Yeah. But that's supposed to be good for you.
I
isn't
know. But I like, I read, because I'm an obsessive Googler. It's like, don't eat too many grapes a day. And I'm like, well, how many grapes is that? Like, I need somebody to tell me like how many grapes I can eat. I think the green ones are lower in resveratrol,
They
but
are.
you're also
Yeah.
not supposed to eat raisins apparently, which I kind of think is BS too. And the pineapple thing, it supposedly causes uterine contractions.
Really?
These
Okay,
are all
that's
healthy foods that pregnant women
yeah.
probably should be eating, though. And so I see all of this fear mongering around the food issue, and I'm like, this can't be good.
Yeah,
This can't be
soft
good.
cheese as well. Like I was told not to eat soft cheese. I've been eating soft cheese almost every single day
Right.
since the beginning of my pregnancy. And I've never heard this thing about grapes being bad for you. In my second trimester, red grapes was one of my biggest cravings and I ate them all the time. So
Yeah.
hopefully that's not such
I'm
a big
sure
deal.
it's fine. I don't mean to freak you out. I mean,
No,
it's a
it's
lot of
okay.
mommy blogger nonsense.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the
But
pineapple thing, you have to eat 5 to 7 whole pineapples a day. I think it's like something called bromelain.
who is doing that though?
Yeah. I don't live in Hawaii, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. In the second trimester as well, like finally I got a lot of my food aversions to go away. So I just started just intuitively
Yeah.
eating again. But now that I'm in the third trimester, there are a few things that I am actively eating every single day, in the hopes of it, affecting my labor in a positive way. I'm sure that anyone who has, gotten into the mommy pregnancy community has heard that organic red raspberry leaf is supposed to be one of the best things, which helps to tone the uterus,
Yeah.
and give you, supposed to tone the cervix itself, so that you're supposed to help you dilate more effectively, so that you're not, in labor for 40 hours. I don't know what the possibility is of that actually being true. I don't think there are many studies done to prove anything, but I'm drinking it once a day. It's full of vitamins and minerals, so I know it's not going to hurt me. And then nettle tea as well. I'll steep those two things together because that also has loads of vitamins and minerals. And the other thing is dates. I don't know. Have you heard anything about this? Dates is meant
I
to
know
be
they're
one of,
high in fiber.
yeah. They're also super high in potassium, and they actually have a bit of protein in them. I can't actually remember what the active ingredient is that's supposed to be good for encouraging speedy labors and easy labors, but that's something that I've heard time and time again. So I've been making like protein balls with dates because I can't just eat them on their own. They're way too sweet. So I'll mix them with like peanut butter and hemp seeds and chia seeds, blend them up with cacao.
Wrap them with bacon and then throw them in
I've
the oven?
tried that before. I used to work in a restaurant where that was one of our starters, dates wrapped in bacon and then baked in the oven. It's like so amazing.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to make that later today now. I haven't thought about that. That sounds
That's how
so
pregnancy
good.
cravings go. It's like somebody mentions it and it's like, if I don't get it, I have to have it that day. Let's go back to this soft cheese thing, because this is
Sure.
I've done so much research on this. It really pisses me off. They always, even the FDA says soft cheeses, but what they really need to say is unpasteurized cheese. It doesn't matter if it's soft or if it's hard. It doesn't matter. You shouldn't be eating unpasteurized cheese. Now, that's because of the risk of listeria, which is cooked off in pasteurization. Listeria is uncommon. Only 1 in 8,000 babies is born with listeria. However, even though it's uncommon, when you're pregnant, your chance of contracting listeria is 27 times what it is if you are not pregnant. It's something about your immune system not functioning as well. Listeria is kind of a benign infection if you're not pregnant, elderly, or an infant. So in general, that's really what they should be saying. And it's not pretty much, if you accidentally eat unpasteurized cheese, it's typically not going to be a huge deal, but don't eat queso fresco, because 17% of all cases of listeria come from unpasteurized Mexican cheese.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay, well there you go, guys. Don't eat that. I've been pretty much just eating like Philadelphia soft cheese, which I'm sure has been like pasteurized to the point where there's like nothing good in it for you anymore. It's like it's
fatty. That's okay. Yeah.
So what about exercise? Have you how is your exercise, like your energy levels, and have your energy levels affected your ability to maintain exercise, or what exercises do you enjoy doing the most
We
at this
talked about
stage?
this a little bit on the show last time, but
Yeah.
I was really into bar before
Mm.
I got pregnant, and I was going like 4 to 5 days a week. I was like totally on it. As soon as I get pregnant, I'm like, nope, no, can't do it, can't do it. And so now, honestly, I'm just trying to make sure that on average, I walk a mile a day.
That's perfect. That's really good.
I mean,
No,
geez.
walking is supposed to be one of the best exercises, actually, because it's not putting too much strain on your joints. It's not like straining your
Yeah.
core, which is like has all sorts of crazy things happening in it. Get your heart rate going still. So I think that's great. I mean, in my second trimester, because of the move, I didn't do any exercise for like 2 whole months, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, and that was partially like stress related. It was energy related. It was like not having a gym and like having to get all of those things in order. But now since I've settled in my new place, and we have a gym, squats have been something that I've been doing a lot, and I friggin' hate it. Like I dread it. I hate it
Yeah.
so much. It's one of the worst things ever. I hate, like, I don't like squats anyways, but
Yeah.
doing squats when you have like 4 to 5 pounds of baby on your front, it's hell. Like I hate it. But I can't remember the name of the lady. I'll kick myself now because I can't remember her name, but she's kind of like an icon in the home birth community. She like spearheaded the home birth movement like in the 70s. And she says that squats one of the best things that you can be doing just during and throughout your pregnancy,
Ugh, but I
keeping your
don't
legs.
want to.
I know, but apparently if you have strong legs, it's easier to push your baby out.
Oh man. And then I
I
guess it
don't
probably
know.
helps your pelvic floor too.
Yeah, exactly, because you're kind of doing like a gentle Kegel whenever you come back up from a squat. So I've been doing that. I've also just been doing like walking uphill, like just gentle walking uphill, because I find that I start to get super intense round ligament pain if I do like the elliptical or if I do like jogging.
Yeah.
Especially on my right side because my baby is primarily lying on my right side. So there's like an uneven
Yeah.
weight distribution in my abdomen, so I have to be kind of careful with that. And like, that's kind of all I've been doing is that. Oh, I've been doing stuff for my shoulders too because I find my posture is getting really bad. I find myself like hunching and hunching like
Yeah.
as I get heavier and as my back kind of starts to get more strain. I've been feeling like I need to catch myself and pull my shoulders back. So I've been doing kind of like these things with weights.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called. Yeah, I'm not even gonna try and remember what it's called, but those things to kind of practice your shoulder caps and your shoulder blades to try and give myself that extra strength because I'm going to be holding baby soon too,
Right.
which is going to be hard on the back. So those are the things that I've been doing. And I mean, if nothing else, like if I'm not gaining, I know I'm not gaining muscle, but I'm hoping that I'm not losing too much muscle throughout this pregnancy. And I find that the exercise is really good for my mental health.
Yeah.
It just makes me feel strong. It makes me feel like I'm doing something for myself and for my baby.
Preparing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It just gives me that sense, a little bit of peace of mind. And I think it also expels a fair amount of just anxious energy. So like I'm too tired to be using Dr. Google to find out information about why I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah, you burn through the neuroticism and then you can't do it. We had a good question coming through the chat. Do you guys recommend vitamin supplement tablets such as B12, B5, D, etc.? Doctors often tell me to purchase some, but I'm skeptical on stuff made in labs. We did talk about this in our last video, and I hate watching YouTubers that act like they know what to do all the time. I am not a doctor. I am not a nutritionist, but what my doctors have told me to do is to take, you're a dude, so I don't know if this is going to be very good advice, but I take a prenatal vitamin.
Yep.
Folic acid is particularly important during pregnancy and pre-pregnancy. And so I just take like one multivitamin, 1 tab of DHA. I take 2000 IU of vitamin D because I'm pregnant in the winter. But as far as vitamin supplementation, I think it's good, especially if you have deficiencies in your diet, and even people with like really, if you're not eating a Mediterranean diet all the time, then like you have some vitamin deficiencies probably.
Absolutely. And especially us living in kind of like more northern climates where you have like at least 4 to 5 months of the year
Yeah.
where you're not getting that sunlight. The extra vitamin D, I think, is super important. I've been taking B12 is one thing that I always supplement extra, and and my husband is kind of the authority for my knowledge on vitamin supplementation. I don't really know personal. I haven't done the research. I just trust him because he's into that world. He knows more about it than I do. So I just take what he tells me to take. And it might sound like a lot, but I take 10,000 IUs of B12 extra on top of my prenatal every day. I take 2,500 of vitamin D. I recently started taking calcium.
2,500. Is that a vitamin D? Okay.
Yeah. So just 500 more than what yours is. It's essentially the same.
Well, there's
because
400 in my prenatal, and then I supplement 2,000 additional. So we're about the same.
It's about the same exactly. And then I've been taking calcium. In the last stage, I only just started recently supplementing extra calcium because I just have this feeling that I need it.
Yeah.
I don't really know why, but I just feel like I need it. And I also supplement magnesium and zinc at night. And I find that helps me sleep. I find it helps keep my digestion moving. And it's supposed to be really good for your blood. So that, and also D8, I take a krill oil tablet when I'm not taking the fish eggs. So the fish eggs are kind of my DHA, but because they're all frozen in my freezer, normally there's one day in between taking a block out and letting it thaw where I can't get any, which is like, I love those days, they're the best. And on those days, I take a krill oil. And I also have like a folate prenatal, which has, I think it's around the same amount as you. It's about
800 micrograms.
It's between 800 and 900. It's one or the other. I can't really remember.
And I eat shitloads of broccoli.
I really
so much broccoli.
Nice. Good. We also switched to iodized salt as well, because even though there's iodine in my prenatal, iodine is supposed to be good for brain development and that kind of stuff. So those are the main ones that I focus on.
Yeah. I mean, I know it sounds confusing, especially with Robyn doing the extra supplementation, but we've discovered within our conversation that the difference between our regulatory agencies really dictates the supplements that we're getting. So the multivitamin that I get contains a ton of what sounds like extra supplementation from
right. Yeah.
So so she's not like taking all sorts of crazy stuff. It's mostly what would be contained in a regular prenatal vitamin if she was living in a country where they had more oversight in this.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that we won't go into it again. I won't go on my rant about prenatals again, but it just as an aside, it is really hard to find a prenatal that has what I deem to be an appropriate amount of each vitamin in Canada. It seems like, based on what you've told me, with the one a day, which I know is readily accessible, like at any CVS, pretty much. When you told me what was in that one, I was like, oh, that's exactly what I would be looking for.
Right.
So
yeah,
I guess it depends on where you are.
Before we talk about our birth plan, I wanted to go back to the subject of energy level, because this is something that's really, there's a big discrepancy in our pregnancies about this. And I've heard from so many people, like, you're going to feel awesome in your second trimester. You're going to have all this energy, blah, blah. And like, I feel basically the same. I still have to get 12 hours of sleep and take a nap like every day. I'm super tired all the time. And so I'm just wondering, like, is this normal? If people in the chat have been pregnant before, did anybody else not experience this this absence of just crippling fatigue in their second trimester? Because I heard it's supposed to be like the glory days of pregnancy and everything like that. But like, I'm fat, I'm tired, I'm gassy. Like this sucks. It just sucks. And you are like glowing, you know, like you're like this earth mother goddess, and you're like, I love being pregnant. You're always sending me pictures where you're touching your belly and stuff. And I'm over here like trying not to barf and sleeping till noon, and I haven't taken a shower in 3 days, and I'm like, I hate this. I hate all of this. This sucks so much.
Well, that's the interesting thing about pregnancy, right? Like we will get the standard average experience, which does sometimes seem to tell women that they should be getting an energy burst in trimester 2. And I feel like I was very fortunate to get that energy burst. But every pregnancy is different. Like your pregnancy next time round, your second pregnancy, like might be totally different than this one. And I might be where you are in my next pregnancy, right? Because it's not just you, it's the baby you're carrying, and you know how your hormones are fluctuating depending on all sorts of external stimuli. So I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat are saying that they didn't get.
Oh, good.
So I think there are a lot of people that just feel tired throughout the entirety of their pregnancy. And I've been noticing now that I'm nearing the end of my pregnancy, for me, it's like a day-to-day basis. Like I can't really say like in my third trimester, I have this energy or I don't have this energy. It's like today I slept 15 hours and I still feel tired all day long. And then there was a day like a couple days ago where it was actually right after I went to the chiropractor and I had the best sleep. I feel like I had the best sleep of my life. And I like woke up and I cleaned my whole house. I went into full nesting mode. I was like doing food prep and like vacuuming and dusting. And it was like, I didn't know myself. So it's crazy how much your energy levels fluctuate. And how, you know, when you have those long periods of low energy, I think you can kind of forget what your normal is, what your baseline is.
Definitely true. Yeah.
It's hard because you get down on yourself about it, but it's fine. It's normal.
I'm seeing a lively debate about caffeine. This is something we probably should address too. So I did a ton of research on caffeine because I had heard that it causes miscarriages, and I am a coffee drinker. I need it. I read this book called Expecting Better. It is a fantastic book written by an economist, and she digs into every risk in pregnancy and like the statistics of each risk. So there are some studies that show that miscarriage rate increases between 500 or between 50 and 300 milligrams of caffeine a day, which is not much. She digs into those studies, and as it turns out, those women that were still drinking coffee were the same women that were not having any food aversions. And not having any food aversions is a risk factor. It's not necessarily causal. It's a risk factor in miscarriage. So 30% of women that have no food aversions have miscarriages. In women that do have food aversions, only 8% have miscarriages. So as it turns out from those studies, it appears that it's not the caffeine that's causal in the miscarriage. It's the lack of food aversions. Because I've talked to a lot of people. This didn't happen to me, but once they got food aversions, the first thing that they were like, ew, I cannot stand the smell of coffee. Get this away from me, whatever. But from the studies that I've read, anything up to 200 and maybe even 300, but if you want to be safe, I keep it under 200 milligrams a day is fine. That is 1 to 2 standard cups of drip coffee or 1.5 double shot lattes. You can control caffeine more if you get espresso shots in the drink because then you know exactly. Drip coffee tends to actually, which is counterintuitive, but drip coffee has more caffeine.
Yeah, because it steeps for longer.
I mean, espresso, those are like little crack shots. So everybody thinks that espresso is going to have more, but the average espresso shot has between 30 and 75 milligrams.
It's not a lot.
It's not a lot. Yeah. So even like a double shot latte of like a tall latte at Starbucks that has 2 shots, that's going to be 150 and you're going to be about tapped out for the day, which is fine. But generally, I think the caffeine is fine. I don't think that it has any causal relationship with miscarriage. I think it's a food aversion thing. I would agree. Yeah, I think that American College of Gynecology and Pediatrics, whatever one of pregnancy, something like that, they say that anything under 200, and I'm seeing some regulatory agencies under 300 is fine.
Yeah, and I've been drinking 1 cup of coffee since the beginning of my pregnancy, and I do drip coffee. So I like time how long I let it steep. I never let it steep for more than 2 minutes. And I have like a scoop, which I think it's 30 grams of coffee so every time it's the exact same amount that I steep in my little AeroPress. And based on what I've calculated based on the beans that I have, because it's different for bean to bean too, which is the other like kind of annoying thing about it. I'm probably getting between 100 and 120 grams of caffeine in that one coffee a day, which I'm fine with that. I don't drink soda. I don't drink Coca-Cola.
Right.
You know, I don't get caffeine elsewhere. So
Or chocolate or anything like that.
Yeah.
Dark chocolate. Yeah, it's fine.
So I think it's fine.
I think that there's a lot of hysteria surrounding the caffeine thing. And then I don't have any other kids. And so, but I've seen like some of my family members and stuff do it. When you have a toddler and you're pregnant, like, I don't see how you could possibly do it without a cup of coffee. Like,
No, me either.
I'm so tired. These poor women with all these kids running around that are also pregnant. I'm like, how do you do this? It's crazy.
I know. I have to keep reminding myself, like, this is going to be the easiest pregnancy that I ever had. You know, and it's not. It's like I sing the praises of pregnancy a lot because I do genuinely enjoy it in most ways. But there are times when I'm just like, I'm done with this. This sucks. Oh my God, I want my body back. And I can't even imagine what it's going to be like with a toddler.
Oh yeah, I know. The body thing's really depressing. Like, oh man,
I'm so huge. I'm so uncomfortable. It's like, it's so depressing.
We did talk a little bit about weight gain. I don't know how specific you want to get, but I weighed myself this morning and I'm 19 weeks and I've gained 12 pounds.
Oh, that's fine.
Oh,
that's
God.
fine. I think that's okay.
It's not just belly weight though. It's like ass.
It's all over.
Yeah. My face looks fat. I'm like, this just is such
mine. My face has gotten rounder as well, which I'm not happy about.
I'm not happy about
I'm so jealous of those women that like gain weight, but they just don't gain it on their face. Like, oh, I'm so jealous of you ladies that are like,
I know,
that.
I want to have like an Asian woman pregnancy, or she's like, oh, I'm 7 months pregnant. I'm like, where's the baby? I can't even tell. Can't even tell you're pregnant. I'm super jealous.
I keep coping with the fact that I've read a few studies that say that women who don't gain the doctor recommended amount by the 3rd trimester, which is roughly 35 to 40 pounds for a woman with a normal BMI at the beginning of her pregnancy. It can be more if you're underweight when you get pregnant, if an underweight BMI. But that I've read studies. Now, of course, it's like a hashtag not all thing. All these things are, you know, they're going to be exceptions, but they say that the women who are underweight end up with babies that have a lower IQ. And those studies also came out of Asia, where there was like nutrient deficient populations because of the lack of accessibility to good and proper nutrition. So I'm just trying to like, so, you know, it's okay if I'm fat, my baby's going to be a genius. It's all good. But
we should show our bumps at some point too.
At some point, but not today.
I know. I'm like, oh, but in the 50s, they told women to only gain between 10 and 15 pounds. And then they were having all these small for gestational age babies. Yeah, and so they upped the recommendation 25 to 35 pounds for people with normal BMIs, typically in America is what they tell you.
Yeah. Like I still have just under 2 months and I've gained a solid 30 pounds. So, and I think, you know, cause your weight fluctuates daily. I think it's probably closer to 31, 32 at this point, meaning, you know, if I'm gaining a pound every week, which is what my midwife wants from me up until the end of my pregnancy, I could be, you know, rocking 40-pound weight gain, maybe even a little bit more.
That's not that crazy though. That's just like 5 pounds. I mean, 5 pounds is like 2 glasses of water and a big poop. That's fine.
I love that.
Are you having skin problems? I'm seeing this in the chat too.
No, I'm really lucky. I've had no I've like had the best skin of my life. Basically in this pregnancy, I've had no pimples. I feel like my wrinkles are disappearing. I have no stretch marks. I'm very blessed to have had one of those pregnancies that seems to do wonders for my skin. So that wouldn't be my experience. What about yourself?
I've never before had cystic acne, but I'm getting cystic acne.
Oh, no.
I'm also getting a pregnancy mask. It's like this redness that goes around here. And then it's just like, it's really bad in this area.
Oh no. Is it itchy or is it just discoloration?
It's discoloration, but it's bright red and like on the least attractive part. It looks like I have a Fu Manchu that's red and then like filled with like blackheads that are unpoppable. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? It's rough. It's rough. Yeah. But
that's really sad. I know there's a YouTuber called Sarah's Day, who also had that when she was pregnant.
So weird.
Maybe after the chat, I'll link you to her video on that, because I think she had some solutions to how to deal with that rash that she made during her previous pregnancy that she just had. But yeah, no, I've been really lucky. Some people here are saying most of my dark spots faded after birth, but some stayed.
Okay.
It's different for everyone, and maybe my next pregnancy I'll be getting the handlebar rash.
So let's talk a little bit about our birth plans. You're definitely going to have more to say about this than I will, because I'm still in denial about the pregnancy. So I haven't done very much planning. I do know I'm going to do it in a hospital, and I am almost certainly going to get an epidural. So I know that's going to be an unpopular opinion with people, but something that was really important to me on this channel was that, like, I didn't want to do any of this mommy shaming bullshit. Yep. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Sometimes women want to give birth in hospitals, and sometimes they need epidurals, and sometimes they have to have C-sections. Now, the only women that I shame are women that do voluntary planned C-sections for convenience purposes.
At like 37 weeks, like this kind of a thing. Like it's
those women deserve to be shamed.
Yeah. That's a bit much, unless you have like some kind of weird preeclampsia thing happening and it's like an issue, or like you have the diabetes thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just don't really relate to that perspective either.
Me neither. But you, as I understand it, are doing a home birth. You're going to try as hard as you can to do a natural birth. So if you want to tell the audience a little bit about that and about your birth plan.
Sure. So I have a birth plan. It hasn't been written out yet. It's in my head. And a lot of it is, so I expect that when I'm giving birth and when I'm in labor, I'm not going to be able to articulate what I want easily. So the purpose of doing a birth plan is so that your birth partner, be it your husband or your midwife or your doula, can advocate for you in the event that, you are transferred to a hospital, or you're in the middle of like labor land and you're not articulate. You can't sort of get your thoughts in order to say what you want or what you need. They can sort of keep that plan in place for you. Mm-hmm. And I want to call mine my birth preferences, because that's what it is. They're just preferences. I might end up with a totally different birth than what I'm envisioning, and I'm also okay with that. I'm very grateful that I have a hospital just down the road, which can give me an epidural if I need it. Right. So I also feel the same way about you. Like, this is what I feel like is right for me. I saw the documentary, The Business of Being Born, in my early 20s. And I've known since I saw that documentary that when I was ready to have my family, I wanted a home birth, because I'm just like one of these like hippie, like that's just my personality. Right. So I feel confident that my body can do this. And that's what I want to shoot for. So with regard to my birth plan, I've also been using this book. So this is a book that I mentioned on my channel. It's a great book. I got it off Amazon. I can put a link in the show notes later on. The book is primarily natural birth stories by Christian women, which is really cool because it has that extra element of women who take into account the spiritual aspect of labor and stuff. And there's a whole chapter on how to make a hospital birth plan. So like, for example, some things that you might find on a birth plan list is like, if possible, I wish to have a vaginal delivery without pain medication or anesthesia of any kind, or in your case, Rebecca, with pain medication, when I want it, right? When I ask for it, I don't want to be pressured to do it before I'm ready, that kind of a thing. And in the presence of my family or doula. During labor, I would like my husband to be present the entire time. I want to eat or drink if I want to, and so on and so forth. You might also have things like, I want delayed cord clamping, which is something that I want, because based on my research, cutting the cord straight away can result in all sorts of like kind of negative health outcomes, right? Because there's all that nutrient-rich blood and oxygen-rich blood that's still in the placenta, that is still pulsating after the baby's been delivered. And you want to give the baby the time to absorb those things before you just cut the cord. Also, I don't want that antibiotic cream in the eyes. I don't want any antibiotics if possible. Now, I haven't been tested for group B strep yet. If I have it, I will be doing antibiotics.
It's very common, right?
It's more common than I would like it to be. Yeah, it's
like
really
30%,
depressing.
maybe.
Yeah, it's really depressing to think about, because if I am group B strep positive, I'm still going to have a home birth, but I will have to go to the hospital every 5 hours to get an antibiotic drip, and then I'll come back to my house in labor. It's a hassle, but I've talked to my midwife about it. We've discussed the pros and cons, and I'm not really willing to risk not doing the antibiotics, even though I hate the idea of taking antibiotics while I'm in labor, because it sort of damages that great microbiome that your baby would be getting the benefit of through vaginal delivery. But I'm also not gonna risk it. Also, the other thing that is in a part of my birth plan is that I don't want a vitamin K shot. I want to administer vitamin K orally over the course of 2 weeks, which is the German model of vitamin K, which is like, it's like a blood, it's an agent which stops your baby from getting like blood clots in their brain. There are a lot of women who are just outright refusing the vitamin K shot on the basis of like, you know, like the anti-vax community don't like the idea of giving your baby a jab because of the, I guess, speculation that there are really horrible things in the jab itself. And then also there's the perspective that I don't want my baby, you know, a half an hour after being born to be stuck with something sharp and to give them this traumatic experience.
But it was my understanding of the vitamin K shot that the baby's blood doesn't coagulate in the same way that adult blood does, which is why brain hemorrhages are so common. So the research I've done shows that the vitamin K shot has been just a tremendous lifesaver in terms of infant mortality. So my baby's definitely going to get it. Like,
sure. I think it's actually, so if you didn't want to do the jab, you could do the oral administration, which has, I think the difference in success rate is like a percentage.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, that's just purely your preference. I think that still, even though it's a small percentage, it's still a higher degree of success with the jab.
Yeah.
So if you want to go with that, I would never, ever shame a woman for wanting to do that. But it is something that you hear a lot of women talk about. And I think, you know, yeah, okay. I think something like out of 1 million women who get who out of 1 million babies born, 800 to 1,000, something like that, will get this brain hemorrhaging thing. And the problem is that, like, once that happens to you, there's no going back. It's very, very, very damaging for your baby's brain. So if you want to take that risk, like, I'm all about informed consent. You do what's best for you and your family, but it's not a risk that I'm willing to take. Okay, so I'm going to go through the process of doing oral vitamin K, which to me is good enough. I'm happy with that. It's the way it's done in most European countries. So
why don't you tell us a little bit about why you chose a home birth, and I'll talk a little bit about why I've chosen a hospital birth, so that people can get both perspectives here.
So I actually have a list because I'm that crazy. I wrote down my why because this was something that was recommended to me by my midwife. She said, you know, when you're in the middle of a natural birth, you are going to need to know your why. You're going to need to know why you're putting yourself through this, because it's extreme, it's painful. All of this stuff about like, oh, you can just like hypnotize yourself to not feel the pain. I don't really buy into that. I'm sorry. Like women will say things like, oh, I wouldn't describe what I felt as pain. It's just really intense. It's like, okay, you're playing semantic games here. And I think you're really not being honest with women about what they're getting themselves into. It's going to hurt. Yeah. And it's okay to be honest about the fact that it's going to hurt. And I think it's better that we prepare ourselves mentally for this extreme experience. So some of my things that I wrote down for why I want to have a natural home birth. The first thing that I have written down is because I can. And there's no reason to believe that I can't do it. My mother did it and my grandmother did it.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
There's no reason. Now, my mom had me naturally against her will. She didn't get to the hospital in time.
Oh, no.
So it wasn't like this, super big hippie choice that she made. By the time that she got to the hospital, she wanted to have an epidural, but it was too late.
Yeah.
So she had a natural birth with me, and that was fine. I think she may have had an epidural with my brother, but I can't be certain about that. And that's something that I've heard a lot of, actually. Women who do the natural birth thing first, they're like, okay, I did that. I've had that experience. Give me the
Never
epidural.
again. Yeah.
And I think that's more common than people want to admit. So I'm a low risk pregnancy. There's no reason to think that I can't. So I want to try. My next one is that I don't want to numb myself to anything in life in any way. Certainly not such an important experience as birth. I want to feel it all. And that is something that comes from my belief it's my Christian belief that suffering can be lesson. It can be a lesson for you. It can be character building. And I think that if I can go through the pain of my labor, rejoicing in God the whole way through, that will bring me closer to him. And that is also not a judgment to you or anyone who doesn't believe that or like want to go that route, because you're going to be brought closer to God by having a baby, regardless of if it's painful. But that's just my belief. Also, based on my research, hospitals make decisions based on liability a lot of the time, and it's not always based on what's best for the mother. And that's something that anyone who has watched The Business of Being Born will know about. Hospitals have to protect themselves. And if a baby monitor, which is not 100% accurate, tells you that the baby's heart rate is decelerating, because you were given Pitocin and because, your contractions are so intense that you needed an epidural then, and then the baby's heart rate decelerates, and then you get whisked into a C-section, when I think if you hadn't started with the Pitocin to begin with, you wouldn't have the C-section, right? And the thing is, if you only want one kid, sure, have your C-section. Like, that's fine, but I want to have a lot of kids, and I'm not interested in racking up C-sections and having to wait. And
the recovery is brutal. I've heard.
Exactly. I'm just so not interested in that. So I want to be in control of the decisions that are being made during my labor. I don't want decisions to be made for me and my baby based on the liability of the doctors in the hospital. That to me is not like, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
I want to avoid the cascade of interventions, which I just mentioned. I don't want whoever is on call to deliver my baby. I want the person to deliver my baby to have a relationship with me and with my family, and to have kind of a personal investment in the outcome of what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I chose a midwife, and that's why I'm going to go with a home birth with her, because I genuinely feel like she is invested in the outcome that I want for my baby. And she's also a Christian woman. Like, she sees her midwifery practice as a calling. And I feel like people who have that perspective as birth care workers, they're just going to be more invested in making sure the mom has a good experience. Right. Yeah. Because they're not as concerned with liability and things like that. I want to be in a pool. I want to be able to give birth in a pool if I want to. I don't know if I'm going to want to, but you can't do that in a hospital. I want to be able to eat, move around, and give birth in whatever position I want.
That's huge. Yeah,
it is, because there's a lot of things that I've heard about. So like when you're lying on your back, that puts pressure on your tailbone, which can make it very difficult for you to have the baby descend naturally, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have to do more pushing. You're pushing for longer, as opposed to your body, you getting to the point in your labor where your body pushes your baby out, right? Yeah. So that I think you need to move around so you can kind of like wiggle the baby out and through your pelvis and stuff. I know I'm more relaxed. I know the more relaxed I am and the less fear that I feel, the better my chances of birthing naturally are. And I think that I will be most relaxed and feel the safest in my home, which is obvious. I want to avoid a C-section because of the recovery. I want as many kids as God allows. So C-sections would be an interference in that. And I want to own my birthing experience fearlessly. I want to have this achievement and I want this experience. And that's it. And if I need to reference that list at any point during my labor, or I need my husband to like read these things out to me, it's there.
Yeah.
It's on paper, so I can reference it at any time that I feel nervous. And I would recommend that any woman who wants to go into a natural birthing process, you don't trick yourself into thinking that, you know, as long as you do hypno babies, it's going to be easy. Like it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It's going to be hard. It's going to be massively challenging. And I think having your why straight in your head is going to be a huge benefit to you achieving it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, and it was kind of a struggle for me to decide because a lot of the things that you mentioned, especially birthing in whatever position you want, it's a problem for me because I can tell already based on my pregnancy that I'm going to want to push from a squatting position. But you can't do that at the hospital. You have to birth on your back. But that's just what I'm just going to have to compromise on since I've decided to do a hospital birth.
So I think what you are allowed to do, though, in the hospital is birth on your side.
Seriously?
Yeah. And, well, it depends on the hospital, right? Because it's all about liability and stuff. But for most hospitals that I've heard of, you have the option of birthing on your side, but they're not going to tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
If you request it, chances are they'll honor it. And the great thing about being on your side is that tailbone issue that I was talking about, where your body weight is on your tailbone, stopping the natural passage of the baby through the pelvis, isn't as big of an issue.
Right.
You can also apply counter pressure on the hips more easily from a side lying position. Okay. Whereas if you're on your back, all that weight is still distributed across your tailbone, and you're not going to be able to alleviate the pressure on your hips quite as easily. So I would look into that. See if your hospital allows you to birth on your side.
Yeah, it's a really natural hospital, which is another reason that I've decided to birth there. They have a very low C-section rate. The average C-section rate is around 30%. It's at 8% at my hospital. The thing about C-section rates, though, I see a lot of home birth versus hospital C-section rates. And it's true that the home birth rate is lower. However, if you have any situation, if you have any kind of high-risk birth, if you have a breech birth, if you have a twin birth, if you have preeclampsia, if you have gestational diabetes, all of these are very common situations except for the twin birth. You have to go to a hospital. Like, people are going to be like, do not do a home birth in those situations, which is naturally going to inflate the risk that you're going to get a C-section at the hospital. So the studies that I see that are like home births are 7% C-section, hospitals are 30%. They're not correcting for the fact that all high-risk births are going to go to the hospital and all home births are going to be low-risk births, just inherently. I think that one of the reasons it's so low at the hospital, I don't think it has a NICU.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
It might.
So there's an incentive there for them to have the baby born naturally.
That, and any birth that's going to be super high risk or premature is probably going to go to a different hospital.
Right.
So it might be artificially deflated at my hospital.
Right. Okay.
I don't really know. But I do have a team of midwives. I don't think that they do home deliveries, and they all are very skilled nurse practitioners as well that have done hundreds and hundreds of births. One of them has 6 children. Like, they're not messing around. One of them was an emergency nurse for premature infants for 10 years. Wow. And so I feel really comfortable. And then I've gone to the OB-GYN so many times that I've cycled through all the midwives. I know them all at this point.
Perfect.
And I know the 2 OB-GYNs that work there too, in the event that something goes wrong in my pregnancy. The real reason I decided to do it at a hospital is that for any home birth, there's a 3 to 5% risk that something goes wrong and you need to be in a hospital. For most people, for a normal person, they're like, that is a negligible risk that I find tolerable. But I'm like, 5%. Oh my God, I can't handle that. And so that was the real thing. I'm like, I have to do this in a hospital. The reason for the epidural, I've done a lot of research. I don't believe that it has long-term effects for the baby. But the real reason is that I have a low pain threshold and I do not want to be traumatized by my birth experience. There's a common misconception that the epidural makes it so that you don't feel any pain. You still have to labor for a long time before you get the epidural. And those contractions, I've heard from a lot of people, are way worse than the pushing, unless you experience a high degree of tearing, which is relatively uncommon.
Yeah, it's not as common as you think, or it's what you
Yeah.
hear, because it's always the women who've had horrific experiences that want to tell you
Tell
about
you
it.
about it,
The
right?
women who didn't have any tearing have nothing to say. So
Yeah.
those stories aren't the ones that you hear so much, but they're more common than you think.
Yeah, yeah. And we talked to Brave the World last week, and she was talking about how horrifying the pain was. And it's not that I'm like really afraid of having a high degree of pain. I just don't want to be in a situation where I reflect on my birth and all I can think about is like,
How
wow, what a
traumatic it was.
traumatic experience that was.
Yeah.
And so it's just a risk that I'm willing to take, like with the epidural. You know, I'll try not to do it, but I also know myself. And as soon as I'm laboring, which is going to be for a long time, all the women in my family with their first babies have labored for like days, like had contractions for
Yeah,
for
I
like
think for
40
myself,
hours.
like having an epidural is 100% not the end of the world. You can still have
Yeah.
a natural vaginal birth with an
Yeah.
epidural. What
Yeah.
I would be most scared of is Pitocin.
Yeah.
The inducing of contractions, based on what I've heard, makes the contractions so intense
Yeah.
that like basically no one can endure them.
Yeah.
Right. So it's
Yeah.
the stimulant of the uterus mixed with the epidural, which is inevitable, that I think can sometimes, it's the combination of those two that I think scares me most, more than
Yeah.
just the epidural, because I know women who greatly benefited from having an epidural because their body wasn't able to dilate properly
Yeah.
without one, and by having the epidural, they avoided a C-section.
That happened to my
Right?
friend, and she had she was trying to have home birth, I believe, and she just wasn't progressing. She was in labor forever, and by the end of that, she was so exhausted that her midwife was like, "Listen, you need to go to a hospital and you need to get an epidural, or you're not going to be able to get this baby out." And so sometimes people forget that epidurals, in many cases, do prevent C-section, and that's the real thing for me. I just do not want to have a C-section. I just don't want to be on bed rest for a month after I have a baby. And I don't, like when I think about the process of a C-section, it's like that horrifies me so much more than a vaginal delivery.
Same.
And as far as a C-section goes, and I think that like, I know I sound really negative on C-sections, but I also have to keep in mind that even though I think they're very overused and a huge percentage of women that get C-sections didn't have to, I think a lot of being induced is unnecessary. Some of it is very necessary. And if you don't do it, and if you don't do the C-section, you or the baby will die. And so I think that a lot of it, like if it comes down to it and they're like the baby's breech and we can't get it out vaginally and you have to have a C-section, I'm going to be like, let's do this shit. I'm not going to be like, no, under no circumstances can we have a C-section. Like there will be a point where I'm like, whatever you can do to increase the risk that I have a normal baby, do it. I don't care what happens to me. Just get this baby out healthily.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's so important that I, especially for myself, call this preferences. It's not a plan, because it's up to the baby ultimately how this is going to go down, not me. And so I do think having a sense of, sure, we can have our preferences, we can be knowledgeable and well researched about what the best thing is for us as individuals, but I think we also need to be flexible.
Yeah,
right?
Because at the end of the
birth is
day,
so
things
unpredictable.
change. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't want to be so fixated on how I planned the birth to go, that I actually endanger the baby,
Yes,
and so at some point,
exactly.
like I have to trust and listen to my doctors. And I know that there's a lot of white coat resentment towards doctors on the right, but my experience with doctors has generally been good. I mean, I've had experiences with doctors where I do research in tandem, so I kind of have my own perspective going. But like, I trust doctors. I know that hospitals are a business. I know that they're trying to reduce liability and everything like that. But at the end of the day, doctors do want to help us. They do want to bring new life into the world. And if for no reason besides that most of them are pretty good people, because of the liability issue. Like they can't be having babies dying at their hospital because of mistakes that they've made. Like that medical liability is a nightmare for doctors. And so I see that I actually find that reassuring in some way.
Absolutely. I hope the takeaway from this is just that there isn't one way to give birth.
Yeah.
There isn't a right way to give birth. And what's more important is that you're honest with yourself about what's right for you and that you have
Mhm.
self-awareness about what is going to give you the experience that you want and not be comparing yourself to other people's birth experiences or other people's birth preferences.
Yeah.
Like it's there's some sort of hierarchy
Yeah.
when it
Yeah.
comes to giving birth to babies. If you bring a little person into this world, you deserve all the props, regardless of how, it went down.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And I know we've mentioned this multiple times, but it's really important that I drive this home. Like, I do not want to be one of these moms that's like, you should vaccinate, you shouldn't vaccinate, you should have a home birth, you shouldn't have a home birth. Like, this is just what I'm doing. I'm giving birth at a hospital. I'm going to have an epidural. My babies are going to be vaccinated. I had a flu shot.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And I know the comments are gonna be like, you need to watch Vaxxed. I know, I've done all the research. I know. But I do kind of want to be inclusive on this channel for people with all different perspectives about what they do and don't want to do. Who am I? What have I become?
I feel the same. It's impossible to avoid though, because for me, it's about informed consent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that any woman should be forced to vaccinate or to not vaccinate. It should be up to her. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I really do think that. I like, just from my own perspective, I plan on vaccinating as if it's like the 80s, So like there's been about 40 or so new vaccinations that have been added to the list
Right.
since the late 70s, early 80s, and some of those I wouldn't personally be happy with, like especially ones like the Gardasil and this kind of stuff. Like there are definitely some vaccinations I'm going to opt out of, but things like polio, whooping cough, like you can be damn sure my kid's going to be vaccinated. Maybe not the day they're born or the day after they're born, but they will be vaccinated.
I was watching some anti-vax chick on YouTube, I think, and she was like, my children don't need to be vaccinated for polio. No one has polio. I was like, that's because of the vaccine. Like, what do you want here? I don't know. It's crazy to me. But I do kind of understand the skepticism surrounding this.
Of course.
I mean, I'm going to vaccinate my kids for pretty much everything, but people act like all medical procedures come with 100% benefit or 100% risk. But everything that you do, every procedure that you have comes with a mix of risk and benefit.
True.
So I particularly don't believe the vaccine autism link, because I found those studies, they've all had small sample sizes, the widening definition of autism, especially over the last 2 decades. Like, I don't remember if you remember your childhood when we talked about autism, but when I was growing up and we talked about like an autistic student, 9 times out of 10, we were referring to somebody that was nonverbal.
Yeah.
It was a form of mental retardation that was like a hindrance to feeding yourself. But nowadays, when people talk about autism colloquially, it's more like they'll refer to somebody as autistic who has like minor social problems.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the widening DSM definition of autism compared with these small sample sizes, and then just the nightmare of trying to prove causation like 12 to 15 years after a vaccine. It's like you cannot control for all the independent variables that go into that study. There's no freaking way.
Very true.
That being said, there are people that have reactions to some of the contents of vaccines. That does happen. But does that outweigh the risk of getting a potentially deathly or crippling disease? No. For me.
I don't think so. I don't think so either. For me, it's more about like, I agree with everything that you just said, and it would be very much in alignment with how I think about this too. But for me, I want to be able to live in a society where women ultimately have the choice to vaccinate their kids or not, because I don't like the idea of basically handing over my maternal responsibilities to lab coats, right? And just being like, you're in a lab coat, so therefore I trust you. Like, I still have a responsibility to make sure that what I'm doing as a parent is right for me and practicing an informed decision-making process. And also, I don't like the idea of like the government or people who have positions of authority just because of their ability to go to a great school and nothing else, having more.
And a lot of them
autonomy.
did not go to great schools. A lot of them are
Yeah.
like DOs that went to school in the Dominican Republic after getting, you know, rejected from 12 different medical schools in the United States.
Or they're educated in like India or China. You know what
I know
mean?
some
Like,
doctors that I'm like, you're so dumb. Like, how did you possibly? And so we have to keep that in mind too. Like, they are not some sort of demigods that have like more information than everybody else on earth. Like, they are people that are fallible. Largely, I think they can be trusted, but, you know, always retain some baseline level of skepticism for every authority figure that you deal with.
Exactly. They shouldn't be able to force you to do anything against your will at the end of the day. So that's definitely my take on that. But these are all things that are like, I think for women who are first-time moms and expecting moms, they are some of the most stressful decisions that we have to make, just because there are such divergent perspectives on it. And either way, both sides are like, you're going to kill your baby. So it's it's really, it's an intense topic, but I think.
And then deciding what is and is not a good study is very difficult for a layman. I actually made a video on this on Blonde in the Belly of the Beast. It's like, it's one of my skipped in school series. It's like establishing causation and defining what is and is not a good study. So watch that video. I think it's really helpful in that way. But like, if you look at a study, oftentimes it can be very, very convincing. But once you dig into it, you're like, well, they didn't correct for age of the mother or something like that. I see that a lot, especially in these autism things, or father absence. They'll correct for like socioeconomic background or something like that. But that doesn't really embody all of the environmental influences that children are going to experience in the first decade of life. So for the causation stuff, it's like, I just rarely see any study that truly proves causation. I mean, and that makes these kinds of decisions about what we should and should not do in the first year, especially of our children's lives, very difficult. These are really hard decisions. If you're not a scientist, it's like, this is just too much information for me to understand or go through.
Yeah. And I think that is a part of the reason why I also kind of have this appreciation for women who do the hands-off pregnancy thing. Have you heard about this? Just hands-off. They call it hands-off pregnancy. Now, for me, it's a little bit too much, at least for my first baby. Like, maybe when I've had a baby or two, I will feel more confident in my body's ability and in my own knowledge to just go for that. But like, I can understand why some women, they don't want to put themselves through the stress and the spikes of cortisol, because it's such a huge responsibility. And if you don't have the education to decipher what is and isn't true, like, it's just going to send you into a spiral. It's going to make you crazy.
That's true too. And then I'm seeing this in the live chat, but this is also true. Every time you interact with the medical system, you increase your risk of some kind of risky externality. This week, I went to the ER because I had a migraine. I can't believe I'm telling people this on, but I'm going to. Fine. I had a migraine and I was really aggressively vomiting. And then I thought that I started to leak amniotic fluid. And so I freaked out. I called my my OB-GYN, and she's like, go to the urgent care or the ER. I went to the urgent care. They're like, we don't have any of the instruments to like deal with this. Go to the ER. So I go to the ER, and I'm surrounded by like hacking immigrants, like tons of like, and I was like, oh my God. I immediately put a mask on. I'm like using hand sanitizer. They take me right to the birthing unit, and they like test my amniotic fluid, and they're like, it's not amniotic fluid. You probably just peed yourself. Everything's fine. So I go home, and then I'm like, for the next few days, I'm feeling like garbage. I got sick at the ER doing this procedure that was totally unnecessary. I mean, I guess it's good that I went, because if your water breaks at 20 weeks, there's stuff they can do. They can sew up your cervix, that you can be on bed rest and stuff like that. But you know, the risk that I took to do something that seemingly was unnecessary was that I further endangered my baby by exposing myself to a multitude of viruses at the ER. So it's like, I understand why women are like, as little interaction with the medical system as I possibly can have. But if I were leaking amniotic fluid and I didn't go to the hospital, I would have lost the baby.
And that would have been on you
And that
and
would have
no
been on
one
me.
else, right? So I think if you're going to weigh the cost to benefits of that situation, I would have done literally the exact same thing as you.
I mean, it's
Personally.
just like constant cost benefit analysis. And if you do a lot of risk assessment, it can be really maddening. This is why everybody should have a friend like Robyn, who's good at risk assessment and really zen about pregnancy. So yeah, I mean, did we get through everything we were going to talk about? Probably not, but it's like been an hour. So.
It's been an hour. I think maybe it's worth just spending. Do you have time for another 10 minutes or 15 minutes just to do? So we've kind of gone through the first, second, and third trimester, but just briefly, I think it's worth mentioning the fourth trimester, because preparing for the postpartum period is probably the most important thing, really. The pregnancy, you can do all the preparation you want, but the labor is out of your control. What happens after the labor, that actually is in your control. So I think it's worth mentioning a few things about how you can prepare yourself to have a postpartum period that is going to set you and your baby up for success in the long term. Do you have any just off the top of your head, opinions about the postpartum period, or what you're hoping to achieve, or what you're hoping to have planned for by then, or not so much there yet?
Well, I have been told by several people now that in the postpartum period, less is more. So I've heard, like, don't buy a lot of newborn stuff. The hospital is going to give you everything that you need. And really all you need to get through the first 2 to 3 months of baby's life, especially the first 40 days, is like a mattress that's close to the ground and your boob. And cook a lot and freeze a lot of food, because cooking is going to be a real struggle the first few weeks after birth. So that's the plan. I'm just going to be like, husband, I'm sorry, for the next 40 days, like, chores and cooking are on you. And I'm just going to sit with a million podcasts and breastfeed on the ground.
Amazing. I love that. I think that's very similar to mine. The only thing that I would add is that it would be worth making sure. Now, if you're birthing in the hospital, this is kind of already sorted out for you. If you're planning a home birth, make sure that you have a midwife who has breastfeeding education as a part of her services, or in the very least, you have the contact number for a breastfeeding consultant, because depending on what kind of boobs you have, depending on whether your baby has a tongue tie, depending on your milk production, all sorts of things which actually are out of your control, you may need help with breastfeeding. And some women really go through it with breastfeeding. So that's something I would prepare for. Make sure you have that number on hand. And if at any point, in a week to 2 weeks after you're experiencing extreme pain and you haven't figured out your latch, don't be a hero. Call the breastfeeding consultant, get some help. And that's what I plan on doing. I'm really hoping I won't have much issues with that. The other thing I would like to mention is that a lot of women, because women do have easy labor sometimes, and they come out of their labor feeling amazing. Maybe their labor wasn't traumatic. I know it's shocking, but that does actually happen. And I think that they sometimes forget you still need to rest. Labor is a major body event in your life, and you still need to be on bed rest. I've heard of women having a perfect labor, not having any complications, no tearing, no issues whatsoever, and then feeling so good after birth that 3 weeks later they're going out for a jog and they give themselves a uterine prolapse. I've literally heard this on several different podcasts. Don't do that.
Take it slow. Has anybody ever had a really bad flu that lasts 2 weeks, and then once the flu's over, you can't just live normally. You got to ease yourself back into life. I think that's how birth is going to be. It's I'm afterward. It's such a major trauma for your body that after it's just gonna be a while. I'm just gonna have to try something from my old life every few days,
exactly,
until I can get back to something that approximates what I was able to do before I got pregnant.
Yeah. And I think in terms of buying stuff, I mean, I have enough clothes for a week, diapers. I have a breast pump. I have a car seat.
For you or the baby, the diapers?
Actually, I need to get some probably for myself. I am hoping that I'll be able to get away with these period underwear that are like, they have a postpartum period underwear out there. It's from a brand called Nix. And I like the idea of not having to use pads because it's going to be like sore and stuff down there. And I just feel like one of these, like I find pads really uncomfortable anyways. I can't imagine how uncomfortable it would be being sore down there. So I have period postpartum underwear, which are absorbent, which I can use, which they're actually kind of nice. So like kind of silky and have flowers on them. So like it's a little bit better than a diaper, but you know, we have to do what we have to do. And I probably will have some on hand.
I've heard to get, I actually already have one coincidentally, but not for birth, but I've heard to get one of, you can order them on Amazon, one of these like built-in bidets. You can just get them and they just like spray up onto your perineum. And yeah, like I have a toilet that's a bidet. You can adjust like the velocity and like the angle and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, this is going to be amazing for postpartum because you are, I'm sure you're like crusty and sore. I'm sorry for all the men that watched my channel and that have come over here.
What is all the men doing here anyway?
I'm pretty sure many of your wives are pregnant. Yeah,
we need to shoo them out.
I know, right? Like my crusty postpartum vagina that needs a bidet to rinse it out. But I've heard that it's really, really helpful. Postpartum.
My midwife told me she would bring me like a peri bottle, is what she called it. But I think the bidet thing sounds kind of nice, to be honest, because it has just like the direct shot probably right where you need it.
I didn't know we were going to get so gross, but I've noticed on these mom channels that like they go from 0 to disgusting so fast because what happens when you're pregnant and when you give birth is like your body is a medical anomaly and like doctors are looking into your vagina all the time. They're poking around, like you're getting weird breast exams. It's like your body doesn't belong to you anymore because it doesn't. You have a weird alien life form that is just sucking all the nutrients out of you and everything like that. And so everything kind of becomes a topic of discussion.
Yes.
And if 5 years ago, if I saw me talking about this on the internet now, I'd be super horrified. But now I'm like, fuck it. I don't care. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah. My priorities have totally changed since I've become pregnant. And like, even my perspective on like what is even TMI has kind of changed because to some people it's all TMI, you know, but for me, I know that I have so appreciated the women and like childbirth educators online who have just gone there because I would rather know these things than to not know them. And I would prefer to have my content online be something that can help women, like a good friend, a knowledgeable friend, than something that makes me feel like, you know, a perfect little like non-TMI princess, you know, like that's not really I don't really care if people think it's TMI. If it helps someone, then that's what's important to me.
And it remains to be seen I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're okay.
It remains to be seen because we both haven't given birth yet, but
yes,
we don't know if this is going to be adequate preparation. Like I don't imagine that after the birth that we're going to be like, oh, nothing could have prepared us for this. But I kind of want to be like, in terms of the gross stuff, I kind of want to be a little ready.
Yeah. I think that is something that's helpful for reducing the trauma, to be honest, you know, because the thing that I've noticed most women report about causing trauma, it's not the birth, it's not the interventions, it's not where they give birth, it's the feeling that something happened to them. As opposed to their birth being something that they did. And anything can cause that feeling in you, right? So if you're a woman who feels like I am doing this birth, I am choosing this epidural, I'm choosing this location, I'm choosing this doctor, you might actually come out with less trauma than a woman who has a natural birth at home and has, you know, the whole crunchy set up perfectly, but her labor doesn't go as she wanted it to, and she feels like it happened to her. She might have more trauma than the woman in the hospital. And that's the interesting thing, you know, it's more about feeling like you're in control. You know, whatever it is that happens. I'm really excited to go through it so that I can look back on my naive self now and be like, wow, you're such an idiot.
You thought you knew everything, didn't you? but did you know that you poop during labor? Yeah, I did know that. That is the number one thing. Yeah, and throw up.
Simultaneously sometimes. Yeah. I'm not looking forward to that. I really hope I'm not a puker.
But I've heard a lot of women that like weren't prepared for birth, and after I've heard this, no joke, like 5 different women, they're like, "Did you know that you poop during birth?" I'm like, yes. How did you not? Like, you're pushing out your guts with all of your force. How could you possibly think? Yeah. Do you watch Call the Midwife?
No.
Oh, no. It's this amazing show. Everybody should watch Call the Midwife. I mean, there's some like diversity nonsense shoved in there and everything like that, but it's a show about like a poor community in London in the 50s and 60s, and then this group of nuns and midwives that help all the women in that community give birth. But in the olden days, before your birth, they give you nitrous oxide, and then they would give you an enema. Always.
Yes, I've heard that. This is becoming more popular.
Yeah.
Women are going in, like they start labor and they're like, okay, I need to go in for my enema so that I don't like accidentally poo.
Yeah, it's so crazy. It's so crazy to think about. But the vomiting thing, sometimes that is a side effect of the epidural, and then sometimes it's just like the trauma to your body, and nausea just kind of comes with everything. But
yes, I think this is one of the many reasons and ways that birth is a humbling experience for us, right? It's not always going to be the most dignified thing, but it's all going to be worth it in the end.
Yeah.
You know, when you're holding that little baby, you're not going to care about these things, I don't think.
Right.
When you have your little one in your arms.
Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to say about the postpartum period, just as a disclaimer, is to know the signs for postpartum depression and anxiety, because they are something specific. And, if you're afraid to walk up and down stairs while you're holding your baby because you're afraid that you're going to drop the baby and you're going to hurt them, that is a symptom of postpartum anxiety. It's not always like you hear postpartum depression being described as like, I can't bond with my baby. I don't want to feed my baby. I don't want to interact with my baby, which is very problematic, obviously, for loads of different reasons. But it can also be the reverse, where you're so invested in the safety of your baby that you're afraid to do anything, and you're riddled with anxiety about protecting the baby. So neither one of those things are ideal, and they can be solved with a temporary use of different types of drugs. There's no shame in it. I know lots of women, therapy. I know lots of women that went on a certain type of pharmaceutical for like literally 3 weeks and came back from very dark places. So, it's the same thing with the breastfeeding consultation. Like, if you feel this kind of like very intense negative emotion, neurotic emotion, or pain, things that are out of your control, reach out for help. Like, just ask someone for help. Find someone who's either at your hospital or a midwife or a postpartum doula that can give you a hand, because you don't have to do it alone. You shouldn't have to do it alone. Right. And historically, women have always had the community and their extended family.
Yeah.
Experienced mothers and their grandmothers around to support them through these things. As modern women, we don't actually have that as easily accessible to us anymore. And so that's why I think it's so important to just be in tune with yourself and to reach out for help if you need it.
That's definitely true. And if you're very concerned about going on medication while you're breastfeeding, although most SSRIs are only expressed in tiny amounts in breast milk, so if you have to do that, that's okay. I mean, don't be really hard on yourself. It's probably not going to affect your baby, but of course, talk to your doctor. But if you're concerned about that, then do not see a psychiatrist, because they typically want to medicate you before they want to give you the therapy that you need. I would see a psychologist or a counselor that specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy. And if you have postpartum anxiety, I'm dealing with a lot of anxiety in my pregnancy right now, which has led me to a lot of avoidance behavior. Like, I get really worried about toxoplasmosis on fruit. And so I'll be like avoiding apples, which are highly nutritious and you really need to eat. And so I'm seeing a therapist, and he focuses on exposures. And so really what you want to do in these situations, although I don't recommend you take any of this on yourself, get a therapist, but you don't want to do avoidance behavior. You want to just deal with the anxiety of doing normal stuff. So wash that apple normally for a normal amount of time, eat the apple, carry your baby up and down the stairs. Don't just stay downstairs all day. You've got to still do the stuff.
Exactly.
I know a lot of women that have had postpartum anxiety, and it's really hard on them and hard on their families. And since I'm dealing with it now, I'm like, I've got like an eye out for it. I know it's going to happen. So,
yeah,
but CBT has helped a lot.
there are going to be a lot of things that I think give me anxiety too, but they'll be situational. Like I'm already anxious about my baby being in the car.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just like anywhere. Like if I have to go to the grocery store, which is like a 5-minute drive from my house, because it's not even just me that I don't trust, it's literally everything else. Right. So like I'm sure that it's going to be different for every woman. And I think it's really great, the advice that you just gave, which I might even revisit with you later at a later date, if it's something that I struggle with too, because I feel like more so than the depression aspect, the anxiety thing is something that it could be a risk factor for me. And it's something that people don't talk about as much. You hear a lot of talk about the depression, but not so much the anxiety, but it is, like you said, very common.
Yeah. And especially during pregnancy, I have a friend who just became petrified to drive at night. She suddenly had like a terrible phobia of nighttime driving. And I think things like that happen. I mean, because I'm so used to, being in my 20s and only having concern for myself, and like everything that I do that's risky is only a risk to me. But like now the weight of the responsibility for another human, it just bears down on you like the hot sun or something. It's just like, I can't believe that I'm responsible for another life. And that's kind of a realization that women have when they're pregnant, but their husbands don't. And so you're going to be doing all this risk averse behavior, and your husband is going to be like, get your shit together. But he doesn't understand the responsibility that you feel, because until your husband sees that baby, it's like it's not real,
Exactly. Yeah,
so
that's very true.
Like we should probably make a video about this, like the different experiences for husbands and wives in pregnancy.
Totally.
And I know we're having some men on that have young families. We're going to have James Alsop on. I think we're going to have Coach Red Pill on. And that would be an interesting topic there. We should probably wrap it up though. That was such a good conversation. And the live chat had such great questions. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it was really fun today. I really enjoyed it. I like the live format. I think it's better. And hopefully we will be able to do like a super chat option within the next week or two. And when we have that option, you'll be able to super chat your questions, and we'll have a little dedicated segment at the end of our live stream where we will go through every question which doesn't break TOS.
Yep. And then next week, we're going to be having the director from this circumcision documentary on. We'll give you guys a little bit more information on social media when we get that date hammered down, so that you can watch the documentary before you come to our chat about it.
Awesome. And so guys, we're still growing here. So if you enjoyed this chat today, please share the link around on other platforms. Check out the links in the description if you would like to support more content like this. We're going to be adding things to our Patreon very soon. Not just, tiers for you to donate to, but different services, and even private AMA live streams, that kind of stuff. So there's going to be a lot of things developing over the next month or so. So make sure you support the content that's important to you out there, and give us a like in the very least, please. Thanks for hanging out today, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.